This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. My name is Rocky. I came back from a business trip and actually saw my wife leading the real estate agent ready to sell our matrimonial home. This morning, I came back early from a business trip, thinking that I would be greeted by a delighted wife. But I didn't expect to see my wife and a few strangers when I opened the door. I was so confused that I ignored the guys and pulled my wife into the bedroom. "Haley, aren't you supposed to give me an explanation?" My wife was dragged in by me with an impatient face. "Give you what explanation? Isn't it clear? I'm going to sell this house of ours." "Sell the house?" I yelled out at Haley. "Why are you selling the house?" I questioned. My wife was all right with it, because my best friend owes loan sharks for gambling, and if he can't pay it back, he's going to get his arms and legs cut off, and I can't get that much money, so I think we'll sell this house and pay her back. "Your best friend? You mean Tony?" I nodded my head along with my wife, anger building. I don't even know what to say when it comes to Tony's person. Tony is my wife's male best friend, and in her mind, and even in my father-in-law's and their family, Tony is very important, because Tony once saved my wife when she was very young. My wife told me that if it wasn't for Tony, she would be dead. So he's not just her boyhood friend, he's also her savior. The whole family is very attached to him, and because Tony's mother remarried and didn't care about him, Haley tries to help Tony in any way she can. Some time ago, Haley secretly sold our car, at the time of marriage, in order to vote the car written in her name, but did not expect her to secretly sell the car to Tony to fill the hole. I had a big fight with Haley at the time and ended up having to compromise when Haley threatened me with divorce. I'm a little afraid that if I hadn't been there, would I have even had a roof over my head when God didn't know what was going on? Tony now owes loan sharks. Actually hit on the idea of my house. Haley knowingly know that this is my mother left me the only thought. So where are we going to live when our house is sold? I forced back my anger. Mom and Dad said to sell this house and live in that old mansion of theirs first. I looked at Haley. My in-laws actually agreed with Haley to do this. They really played a good game. Tony was in debt and used my house to cover the debt. They sold the favor, but do not move them a hair. A good 1-2 birds with one stone. But I didn't want to make things worse. I wanted to talk to Haley calmly, but Haley didn't feel the same way. She didn't want to hear anything from me, just stared at me. "Rocky, are you selling this house?" No, I didn't want to talk to Haley anymore. I turned to the living room and asked those people to go out. The buyer left cursing and swearing. The salesman was in the back to make amends. Haley watched those people leave, cursing at me, saying I had no conscience, saying I didn't think of her, saying I didn't want to make things easy for their family. I don't want to make things easy for the family? Haley hasn't worked a day since I've been with her. At first because her wife was pregnant, then because she was having a bad day at work. One day she's saying her boss is throwing her under the bus. The next day she's saying her co-workers are ostracizing her. The money I earn is enough for our family, so I didn't force her to take a break, let her rest for a while. It's been 5 years. Home early on a business trip, found that his wife hid him to sell the house, only to realize that 5 years of marriage is a plot. But I have never fallen out with my wife because of this. My mother died early. My father remarried after the death of an accident. I grew up on my own. A lot of girls, because of my parents are dead, do not agree to go out with me, 1 to 2, single to more than 30. At that time I held a try mentality. In a dating site to meet Haley, we are very talkative, interests and hobbies so are very similar. The most important thing is that she does not care about my family. Later on, it was about to meet. She always said that she is an older woman. I did not expect her to look so good. Is the kind of flaunting beautiful? According to reason, she should not be single so long as the looks to the present. She said she didn't want to settle, just want to marry the person she likes. She asked me a question at that time. Do you believe that there is pure friendship between men and women? Of course I believe in it, because I also have friends of the opposite sex. Then she smiled and said, I feel that we two are the same kind of people. We fell in love for a year, which was the happiest time I felt since my parents died, and then we got married when the time was right. However, after the marriage, it was not as peaceful and beautiful as I had imagined. Instead, things kept happening. For one thing, my father-in-law's demands on me seemed to require me to be at the forefront of everything. The main thing is that Tony, Haley's best friend, is always around us. He even wants to follow us on our honeymoon. I don't know how long I can tolerate a threesome. My father-in-law supported me like a gyroscope, but they are not satisfied. I have been consoling myself. After all, is a family, listen to everything. But today, actually want me to sell the house to fill Tony's hole. I cannot bear. Wife, see my firm attitude. Scolded a lot of unpleasant words. Probably means that my parents are dead. Really a cold-blooded person. Is to her life-saving benefactor to see death. I felt bad when I first heard these words, but I've heard them so many times over the years that I just let her be. Besides, her male best friend, her savior, made a mistake. Why should I take the blame for him again and again? But I can't say this, or Haley will think I'm cold-blooded. Haley made the call and packed up her things and went downstairs. Not long after, I saw Tony's figure, two people talking and laughing to get into the car. Before getting into the car, Tony seemed to look up at me. I clenched my hand. This time did not go to stop. According to reason, Tony this identity, I should be grateful to him. But the bad thing is that he is a person extremely no sense of proportion. I can understand who doesn't have a few friends of the opposite sex before they get married. But Tony doesn't have this kind of awareness at all. From the beginning of our relationship, it was almost always a threesome. Well, I put up with it because Haley was good to me, and when she pampered me, I surrendered. But then after we got married and took him on our honeymoon, and then it got even worse, Haley actually stayed out one drunken night with Tony, too. I looked for Haley for a long time that night, waited for her all night, and then came back the next morning only to say that her cell phone was turned off. And when I asked her more closely, she told me I was full of dirty thoughts. The reason I put up with all of that is because Haley is very good to me. We just fell in love that time. I don't eat regularly, stomach problems often. Haley tirelessly get up early to give me congee, staring at me to drink the congee, and supervise me to take medicine. There was one time in particular when I had acute appendicitis, and Haley stumbled to bring me to the hospital, and the doctor said that if I was one step late, I would have a perforated stomach. And many days and nights when my career was not going well, it was Haley who accompanied me those times, so that I have no bottom line again and again. I decided this time never compromise. I want to let Haley know my bottom line. But I did not expect more challenge my bottom line of things so soon happened. That day, I dropped the file at home, rushed to take a taxi home to opened the door to go in to see the door of the shoes mess. I thought Haley figured out back, heart some excitement. These days, I also miss Haley. So the shoes did not come to change and rushed to the house, but saw a scene of spicy eyes. Soothing music was playing in the living room. Tony was naked and in what appeared to be a push-up position, while Haley was below in a cool halter, and from my angle, the two of them were touching lips. What are you guys doing? I couldn't bear to see such a scene, loudly interrupting them. The two seemed to be frightened and immediately separated, but I couldn't control it. I went up to Tony and grabbed him up, gave him a punch. Tony saw it was me and didn't show any weakness. He wanted to go up and hit me, but he couldn't help the power disparity. I've been in the gym for years, not for nothing. Haley saw this and rushed forward to pull me away. Rocky, what's wrong with you? Hurry up and cut Tony loose. I reluctantly loosened Tony's collar and Tony cursed me. You're crazy. Haley actually ran over to check Tony's wound. Tony pushed her away and cursed. I tried to stop him, but Haley pulled me back and questioned out loud, aren't you at work at this hour? What are you doing home? I felt my heart beating rapidly and tried to stay calm. Haley, shouldn't you give me an explanation? Haley's voice was undeniable. Rocky, why are you so nasty? We were practicing double yoga. Yoga for two? Double yoga with lips kissing together? Haley, do you think I'm an idiot? I questioned Haley with a loud voice. Haley, however, couldn't come up with any other reason, but just kept repeating that I was impure in my thinking and looked at everyone impurely. She also scolded me for hitting Tony and being inhumane, and said that if I didn't trust her so much, then what kind of life was there to live? So I might as well get a divorce. If usual when she said divorce, I lost the battle, but today I saw the strong words Haley. I suddenly tired. Divorce it is then. I hear my own voice. Haley, still pointing at me, suddenly froze when she heard this, then a sharper voice. Rocky, how dare you bring up divorce with me? Have you forgotten how I treated you in the first place? I didn't want to hear anymore and turned to leave, shutting Haley's voice behind the door. I've had enough of days like this. I hadn't tolerated the two of them for more than a day or two, challenging my bottom line over and over again. I made up my mind that this marriage had to be divorced. I went to a lawyer to draft divorce papers and went home to talk to Haley. Haley cursed at me. Rocky, you're a scumbag full of dirty thoughts. How did I marry such a useless thing as you? I picked up, it's just as well that we're splitting up. I've been putting up with you two for a long time. Haley probably didn't expect me to get serious and began to explain. How many times have I said, Tony and I are girlfriends, do you understand? I couldn't help but to explode. Fuck male best friend. A man is a man. The whole best friend thing. Disgusting. Haley heard this and came up and slapped me twice. Rocky, who the fuck are you talking about? And screamed at me to hit me. I was chilled by these two slaps. Her best friend. I mentioned as if touching her scales. I pushed her to the side. Divorce agreement you sign after we go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I walked out while listening to Haley shouting, leaving, must leave. Who does not leave who grandson, Rocky? You are a son of a bitch. I only feel deeply powerless. My parents divorced early. I value marriage beyond everything else. Forget it. Let's just take one step at a time. I thought that Haley and I might just get divorced, but I did not expect. I live outside the third day. Actually received a call from Tony. I saw the name. A million do not want to pick up, but angry, Haley and I to divorce this step. He is is the culprit, but he called over and over again. I held back and picked up, and as soon as I did, Tony was all over me, swearing at me. Rocky, are you a fucking man? How dare you do this to Xiaoya? She is pregnant with your child, and you want to divorce her. I was blindsided by the shouting. Child. Haley is pregnant with my child? My mind was full of children. I longed so much for a child of my own, but when we first got married, Haley had an accidental miscarriage and then never got pregnant again. I went from hoping to resigning myself to the fact that I didn't think I'd ever have a child again. Thinking about it, where are you guys? Tony didn't have the good sense to reply. If you still want your baby, get your ass to the hospital. I hoofed it to the hospital. Haley was sitting on a bench in a hospital gown, and Tony was talking to her with his head down, as if the two were having an argument. Honey. Haley looks up and sees it's me. Shock seems to flash across her face. Then she looks over at Tony, who spreads his hands. He's in a position to decide whether the baby stays or goes. After all, he's the father. He then turned his head to look at me. Hyatt said you were getting a divorce and that you weren't going to keep this baby. I went forward and hugged Haley. Wife, I was wrong. I was angry that day. Haley seemed to have just regained her senses, stared at me, and suddenly burst into tears. I was in the hospital, so I took Haley to check her health, but fortunately the mother and child were safe. Yes, Haley was pregnant with my son for almost 4 months. I saw the molded baby on the ultrasound and already roughly saw the gender, suddenly felt guilty for my suspicion of Haley during this period of time, and Haley also explained to me that she had asked Tony to stay with her because I was too busy with work during this period of time, and also apologized to me for almost selling the house, saying that it was because she hadn't thought it through well. I feel even more guilty. I rushed to hold Haley comfort. At that time my heart is full of guilt, but I do not know that the human heart is so ugly. I almost died because of this. After Haley became pregnant, she suddenly became temperamental, and when she was not satisfied, she cursed at me. But whenever she cursed at me, she cried and admitted that she was wrong, and kept saying sorry to me. I learned from the internet that when a woman is pregnant, her progesterone rises and her emotions are very unstable, and she needs her husband's tolerance and companionship at that time. I did my best to satisfy Haley's demands, and now that I have my own son, I sometimes wake up with a smile in my dreams. My parents died early, and I longed so much for a child of my own, but that desire was destroyed by Haley and Tony. The day I came home from drinks with my college roommate Bame, Tony was actually there. He and Haley were in the kitchen, and as I watched in a trance, it actually looked like a couple. I shook my head, laughing at myself for this ridiculous thought. Tony had helped me save my marriage and my children some time ago. As I was thinking about it, Tony looked up at me and broke into a smile as he greeted me. Rocky, you're back. Let's give you a taste of my handiwork. Haley echoed him. Tony's been embarrassed about the way he treated you, so he's made a special meal for you as an apology. I rushed to pick up the conversation. That's not true. I've been narrow-minded. We sat down together at the table, and for the first time, we were so joyful. Tony was like a different person. He filled my wine in his, and then raised his glass in my honor. Rocky, I did a bad job before. Mainly, I was always afraid that you would bully Xiaoya. Now it seems that you treat her very well, and you guys have a child, so you're a grown-up. Forgive me as Xiaoya's best friends worry. I dry this glass of wine. We will write off the past. Said without waiting for me to reply. A glass of white wine is dry. Then Tony has been smiling to pour me wine. I do not refuse. After all, once I also have a mistake. I had been unhappy with his relationship with Haley, plus he had helped me this time regardless of the past. I was even more embarrassed to refuse. Tony and I had a good time at my house, plus I had been drinking before, so I accidentally got drunk. Haley, however, suddenly told me that she had left her ID card at her father-in-law's house a few days ago and asked Tony to go get it. I was already drunk and interrupted to say, honey, what do you want Tony to do? I'm not here. Your husband? Haley wasn't as tough as she usually is. Honey, Tony is familiar with that road, and I don't feel comfortable with you being drunk. Haley actually thought about me so much. I was drunk. I didn't listen to her. I took the car keys and left the door. Haley stopped me at the door. Haley in the door to stop me. She can't stop, and I said, husband, to my house that path you do not remember it. There is remote. No one to watch. You can be careful. There is still your son in the stomach. If I hadn't been drunk, I might have found a loophole in her words. It was just an ID card, which was so important, but at that time, I couldn't care about anything. When I woke up again, I tried to open my eyes. My eyes were white. This should be in the hospital. My head hurt, a little confused. I only remember that I was on the road to my father-in-law's house, a big downhill, but the brakes suddenly failed, all the way to the bottom of the ditch. I hit the rudder at the last minute, and the car hit the tree next to me hard, and the bang was the last thing I remembered before I passed out. I had just had the car serviced 2 days earlier, so how could the brake suddenly fail? The pain coming from my head, so that I do not have time to think carefully. Close your eyes to ease the pain. I heard my wife's voice from far and near. I was in a car accident. She must have been frightened. After all, she is so timid people. I didn't have time to open my eyes when a familiar man's voice rang out beside me. His words were, "Is he sure he won't wake up? If it isn't Tony." Then came the voice of his wife. "It's been 3 days since he went into a coma, and if he doesn't wake up in the next 2 days, he probably won't make it." Tony said something else that caused Haley to interrupt, and because their voices were so low, all I heard was the word compensation. I didn't open my eyes until they left, my eyes filled with shock. Why would they say something like that? They must be hiding something from me. What was it? It was my wife who told me to go to my father-in-law's house to get her papers in a great hurry, and it was she who warned me to take the path that went as far downhill as it could go. Was it all really just an accident? But I have a gut feeling this whole thing can't be that simple. Why is this? I asked myself to treat her well. I called the nurse, and the doctors and nurses poured into the room and began to inform the family of the happy news. And I looked at the look of surprise on my wife, Haley, and I realized that if I hadn't heard those words, I wouldn't be able to tell her. If I hadn't heard those words, I would have been touched to the core, but now I was left with nothing but skepticism. And the person I had always thought I knew best on the pillow was a bit of a mystery to me now. But the compensation? I suddenly thought of the insurance Haley bought for me some time ago. The beneficiary wrote her, because during that time she suffered from a lot of problems. She always said that she was afraid that if something happened to me, how should I live if I left them as orphans and widows? Tony was videoing with Haley at the time and said, "Then by insurance," followed by, "I'm just saying." If he hadn't said that, I might have been skeptical, but after he said it, and I went off the deep end, it did seem like a problem that. Haley said she wanted to take out an insurance policy, and as a father it was my duty to insure my children, so I took out a $5 million policy with our children as the beneficiaries. But now I was a little skeptical of Haley's motives for doing this. It occurred to me that some time ago, because I was always traveling on business and was afraid that pregnant Haley might have a slip-up, so in addition to the restroom, I installed cameras in every corner, connected to my cell phone. I asked BAME for a hidden camera so that Haley wouldn't be shaken by the light from the camera. But then Haley was at her mom's house most of the time, and I didn't pay much attention to it. But my decision at that time did me a big favor. I got slightly more memory for the camera. It keeps 6 months. So when I got home, I started checking the recordings. The images stung my eyes. I covered my face with my hands. They had tricked me so badly. It turned out they had been counting on me all along, wanting me dead while they could take my insurance money and get away with it. They were so deep in their schemes. How much does Haley know about this? I almost slapped myself. At this point, still excusing Haley, but what can I do if I know the truth? I only have the video of them together. The insurance is purely based on guesswork. Will the police believe me? And Haley, I was in deep thought. I saved all their photos and videos. I can make them lose their reputation, but Haley is pregnant with my son after all. She is carrying my child. If she goes to jail, can my child hold up his head for the rest of his life? I was a little hesitant to wait for her to give birth to the baby, and then I could figure out what to do about them. But before I had time to think long and hard, life gave me another blow. Half a year ago, I went on a business trip to do a full body checkup because I wasn't feeling well, and then I forgot about it because I came back early. The hospital reminded me to get the medical report at first, but stopped reminding me as time went on. When they were organizing the medical records, they saw my medical report and called me again, saying that if I didn't go to get it, they were going to destroy it, and that I had suffered too much during this period of time, so I would go there to take a break. Looking at the words on the medical report, I appear to be in a trance. What do you mean no viability? At that time, because Haley and I have been married for several years, except for the first year there was a child aborted, then there has been no child, so I had the test done by the way, but I didn't take it to heart. I've always been a healthy person. No diseases, there must be no problem. Then Haley and I had a child. I would not think about this. However, on the medical report, it is clearly written that my viability is 0.01%, and the doctor told me that this means that I can't have a child, and that 0.01 is for the sake of accuracy. I was thunderstruck. I couldn't have children? Whose baby is Haley carrying right now? Thinking about the video again, the baby is most likely Tony's. The doctor reassured me that medicine is very advanced now and told me not to be discouraged. I could no longer hear the doctor's words and walked out of the hospital disoriented. Looking out at the bright sunshine, I couldn't support myself and fell to my knees in front of the hospital, sobbing uncontrollably. I, Rocky, a complete idiot, was tricked into almost giving my life. I actually almost raised a child for my enemies. How stupid do I have to be? Do they take me as a person? person? I hate it. The people around me looked at me and whispered, thinking that I was suffering from a terminal illness because I was crying so hard. And an old man came to advise me, my child, we have to look forward to the future in everything. It was like I was being poked and prodded. Yes, the people who did this to me are still alive and well, so how can I let them look at me funny? Haley, Tony, you wait. I'll make you pay in blood. When I got home, the house was quiet. Haley sent me a message. Hubby, I'm going back to my parents' house for a few days. You've just been discharged from the hospital. Take a good rest. I just came back from the edge of life and death. Haley actually did not care about me. It looks like I have no more use for her. I thought with hatred. I thought about what I wanted to do. I forced my hatred to board the door of my father-in-law's house. They are not very enthusiastic about my arrival. Mother-in-law symbolically greeted a few sentences, as usual, or busy with their own business. Haley is not at home. They perfunctorily said Haley went out for a walk, but I guessed, presumably a family reunion ago. I seemed to be indifferent, but inside I was still cold. But I still took out the $20,000 I had prepared beforehand. Dad, Mom, Haley is staying at your house for the old age. Their mother and daughter rely on you to take more care of them. You have worked hard. This is $20,000. You two old people take it and buy some nutritious food. Father-in-law only then looked at me squarely. Mother-in-law also came up with a pleasant face, said, take that money for what? Hands but very honestly took it. I said, Dad, Mom, you can put the money. Sure enough, the old couple immediately headed for their bedroom. While turning back to explain to me, Rocky, you sit by yourself for a while. You're right, we need to put the money away. As soon as they were inside, I planted the pinhole cameras I had prepared in the living room, kitchen, and Haley's bedroom. I had asked my college roommate Bame for several. I had to make the most of it. After I was done, I left on my own. I really didn't want to have to deal with Haley's parents. I never cared about it originally, but when I found out the truth, I started to notice things I hadn't before. The family never treated me like family. My parents died young, so I've always treated Haley's parents as if they were my own. The way they picked on me and treated me with indifference, I saw it as because they treated me as someone close, so I never had the slightest bit of resentment towards them because of that. Now that I think about it, I guess I was full of dislike for me. I went home, first to Haley, back to the message. Wife, you are at home I cannot take care of now. You might as well stay at Mom and Dad's house for a while more. Let Mom and Dad bother. She quickly replied back to me. Okay. I sighed deeply. I saw on the monitor that Haley didn't get home until after 9 p.m. and she was all smiles. Tony also came back drunk. The family was happy and chatting together. Tony probably drank a lot, talking all upside down. Haley's mom gave him to go to the honey water. Tony's eyes looked straight at Haley. Haley was furious. What are you staring at me for? Tony said in a low voice. Tony said in a low voice. Why isn't Rocky dead? Haley glared at Tony. What are you talking about? Haley's mom also slapped Tony and handed him honey water. Don't talk drunk. Drink the honey water and go to bed. Tony still stared at Haley. We went through so much effort. How come he didn't die? Haley rushed forward to cover Lin Xing's mouth. Haley's parents heard this and came around, eagerly asking, yeah, is what Tony said true? Haley saw that she couldn't hide it anymore, so she nodded her head. Haley's mom went up and slapped the two of them straight. You guys are murdering no what? Haley looked impatient. I know. It's all about the money, isn't it? Do you know how much that settlement was? $5 million. Lin's father sighed. Anyway, things are already like this, then pointed at Tony. Keep your mouth shut. Rocky's fine too. Just pretend it never happened. I sneered from this side of the monitor. If I hadn't been so lucky, I'd have been a corpse, and no one would have done me justice, but they do not have a trace of guilt, only not been found glad. 5 million actually can take my life. Do I count as a person in their eyes? Tony did not raise his head to Haley, sneering. In fact, I quite admire Rocky. You said that you were pregnant with my child to marry him, afraid of being found out and want to get rid of the child, but now he is going to help us raise the child. Actually do not know. His head is green grass. As a result, now he is going to help us raise a child. Actually do not know a little. Their heads are all green grass plains. Really is the honest man we want, ah? After saying that, he walked into the bedroom askew. Haley froze in place. I also froze in the monitoring side. I thought the experience of the past few days is enough blood. I did not expect to be counted from the beginning. No wonder Haley and I met only a month to get married. The original is to find an honest man as a receiver. I was complaining that I didn't care enough to abort the baby, but she and Tony had been working together for a long time. No wonder she said Tony had thought of a way. So she wanted to use my life to fill his bottomless pit. I want to ask for never much, just want a warm home, wife and children together, Haley and Tony, but raw broke in my my dream. My dignity trampled on the ground, not a trace left. Everything I'd ever thought was just a trap. I slammed my fist into the coffee table. There was blood coming out, but I couldn't feel the slightest bit of pain. I hate it. If I hadn't accidentally overheard their plot, I'd still be playing them like a fool right now, and I'd still be in the dark when they ended up tearing my bones apart and skinning me. Haley's mom over there asked Haley, "What are you going to do next?" Haley said, "I'm going to divorce Rocky." Divorce? Dad, Mom, Tony promised me this time that he's changed his ways and will be good to me, and he's working hard to make money now to marry me and give me a better life. Haley looked pouty. Haley's dad said, "You two should be together after all these years. The child still has to be with his real father. But it's just a shame about that Rocky kid. Pity? Their family has been using me as an ATM all these years. Haley hasn't worked a day since we got married, and their whole family is dependent on me. Even though I'm a project manager for a company, I'm living on a shoestring. I'm so determined to give Haley a good life, and in the end, I've gotten myself in over my head. Everything they've done to me, all the humiliation I've suffered, I want it all back. I want them to know that I'm just being honest, and that rabbits bite when they're anxious, not to mention that they've been too cruel to me. I want Tony and Haley to lose their reputation." Haley quickly asked me for a divorce, but I didn't want to let her off the hook so easily. Should I let her and Tony burn up the internet? I was trying to figure it out when Bame came to me, because I asked Bame to take the pinhole camera. He was afraid that I did something bad, especially looking for me out. I told him only Haley cheating and the child is someone else's business. He had to accompany me to drink in order to do comfort. Then he looked like he suddenly remembered something. "Right, Rocky, I told you how that place looked so familiar. Does your family live in the Flying Leap neighborhood?" I nodded my head, not knowing what he was selling. He laughed out loud. "You kid got lucky. The city government is demolishing the building. Your neighborhood is in this category. It almost pays for this." He stretched out his right hand. $500,000? I asked in surprise. "No," he shook his head. "It's $5 million. I really didn't expect that because my parents bought the house for a mere $300,000. Bame told me that the city was going to build an office building there because we didn't have a few families there, and exclaimed that I had gotten lucky, and I laughed a little at the thought of what I'd been through, but an idea popped into my head. The two of them had treated me so well and lied to me for so long. How could I let them off so easily? Since they want money, I'll give them money and I'll let them nest. I'd like to see if their feelings are that lovey-dovey. I asked Bame to do me a favor, and when he asked me why, I just said that I wanted a divorce but didn't want to let Haley off the hook that much. He said he understood because he didn't have the slightest crush on Haley who cheated on him. So Bame pretended to have a chance encounter with Haley and said to Haley, "Sister-in-law, congratulations, don't forget me when you're rich." Haley couldn't remember Bame for a while, and Bame introduced himself. "I'm Rocky's college roommate, the one in the demolition office. It's normal that you're not familiar with me. I always have dinner with Rocky." Haley then remembered him and asked immediately after, "I remember, but what do you mean by I'm developed?" I hid behind a tree and watched Bame. This kid can act. He pretended to spill the beans. "Didn't Rocky tell you? That old house of yours is going to be demolished. It's estimated to be $5 million based on that size." He scratched his head. It's hard for him to forget. Then he seemed to think of something and smiled sarcastically, saying, "Sister-in-law, look at my quick mouth. I think Rocky wants to give you a surprise." Then, "Sister-in-law, let's see you later." After saying that, Bame hurriedly slipped away. I watched Haley hurriedly took out the phone. My cell phone rang. She asked me, "Bame speak reliably?" I pretended to be vain. "Why? Did you run into Bame? What did he say to you?" I purposely pretended to be eager. She hurriedly said, "No, just that my friend asked me if I knew the D&D guy, and I thought of him." I recovered, "Yes, he's from the demolition office. He seems to be a director now. Xiaoya, although you want to divorce me, I can help find him if your friend has something." Haley then thought about the divorce and said eagerly, "I don't mean that," and then hung up the phone in a hurry. Then her face went from incredulous to beaming. I grinned back behind the tree, too, and the fish took the bait. I started listening in on Haley so I could make my next move. Haley started going home and talking to his parents. His parents meant not to get divorced yet. Haley agreed and Tony was all for it. I'm on this side of the monitor sneering. The lure of money, TSK. I go to her phone. I agree to divorce. Haley came earlier than I thought. She cried to me, said it's because I care too little about her. She is insecure, so she pretends to want a divorce. She wanted me to spend more time with her. I just watched her act quietly, sickened by her falsehoods, but for the sake of what was to come, I pretended to blame myself and said we were going to have a good time, then told her about the demolition. Haley acted natural. "Honey, I'm not in it for the money, you know? What don't I know?" Haley was overjoyed. I saw Haley and Tony celebrating together, as if the demolition money was already in their pockets. Tony advised Haley to hold out for another 6 months. Hold back? I saw them in that state and and hated them, so I took the next step. Haley received a copy of the chat log the next day. I faked it, but it was enough. I pretended to be Tony's admirer, Xiaomei, and provoked Haley by saying that I was the only one he loved the most. I used Xiaomei to give him the message, "Brother Tony, when are you going to break it off with that woman?" He said, "Don't worry, when she gets the demolition money." I said, "A while ago you said break. Still not finished?" Tony said, "A while ago is not because he has no use for it. I did not expect Rocky that boy life so big. You do not rush, such as demolition money to my hands. I will dump Haley." I continue to ask, "Tony brother, you don't is not tolerate it. You tell me the truth. You are not in love with that woman? After all, you went through so much together." Tony, silly girl, didn't I say I love you the most? I have no feelings for her, mainly to get back at Rocky, and she can still make us money now. I asked the question, "But she is pregnant with your child." Tony said, "That's her stupidity. I just want the one you're carrying." I said, "FAI is annoying, but thanks to Rocky didn't die. Otherwise you'd be breaking the law, right?" Tony, "What's wrong with that? It's all Haley's doing. What's it got to do with me?" I laughed and said, "Or FAI thoughtful." Tony finally snickered too. "Darling, you just believe me. When the money arrived, we too will be able to double date." There were also explicit words of flirting between the two. Haley locked herself in her room and slammed the bedside lamp. I went to care for her, and all she said was that she was a little short-tempered after the pregnancy, and I thought to myself, this is just the beginning. I knew Haley didn't believe it, but she wouldn't be stupid enough to ask Tony for proof, so I added more fuel to the fire. I waited a few days to call Haley at the office. "Rocky, just now a girl named Xiaomei called me and said that a delivery arrived at the house, so you can sign for it for me, and I don't know Xiaomei." I muttered on the other end of the phone. Haley opened the courier. It was a picture of her and Tony. Haley then recalled the courier she received a few days ago and had to believe that she was so good to Tony and pregnant with Tony's child, and he was so good to himself. Tony calls Haley, who stiffly tells Tony to leave her alone. Tony hates it and says, "Haley, you're going to get rich trying to get rid of me, aren't you?" Haley only shouts at him, "Who is ruthless? You know in your own heart." Tony said, "Okay, you wait." When I got home, I said, "Why hasn't Tony come lately?" Haley, face angry, said, "Do not want to talk about him." I looked at Haley. The show has just begun. Haley and I were eating dinner, and suddenly I got a WeChat. Then I threw away my chopsticks and pointed at Haley. "What's going on here?" It's two photos. One of the two of them, and the other is a policy showing that the sender is Tony. I pointed at the photos. "Xiaoya, is this real?" Haley panicked and I yelled, "Divorce. You must divorce." Haley fell to her knees at once. "Rocky, I was wrong. Just one time. You forgive me. Don't think about me. You think about the baby in my belly." I cried out too. "You sons of bitches. I'm going to kill Tony." Haley tugged on my hand and begged me not to go. I tried to calm down. "What about this policy? Is it a fake? Did you guys plan the last time I was in a car accident? I can get out of the divorce if you give me a reasonable explanation." With a shaking hand, I pointed at Haley. Haley inhaled deeply, made up her mind, explained the matter of cheating on the insurance, but took herself off the hook, said it was all Tony's fault, and said she didn't want to lie to me, so the brakes weren't put on the sabotage so thoroughly, then kept begging me for forgiveness. I have no waves in my heart. Listen to it again. Just feel sigh. I saved my cell phone recording and pretended not to divorce her for the sake of the kids, but started a cold war with her. I really don't want to look at Haley that false look. Can't believe these years I've been sleeping next to someone so vicious. At the same time, Tony's money is borrowing more and more. Loan sharks on the dip will have no room for maneuver. He went to Haley again and threatened Haley. Haley had a hard time not divorcing me, so she had to compromise. I also pretended not to know. Put a lot of money in her hands. I must give enough Tony gambling capital. More than 6 months, Tony debt. Many times he was severely beaten by his creditors, but he didn't dare to push Haley. He just had to look forward to the demolition money, and I was waiting for the child to be born. The day the child was born, I immediately did a paternity test. The identification report fell hard in front of Haley. Lynn, father Haley's mother, also came to round up. Haley struggled and seemed to want to pull my hand. "But Rocky, I've been with you for 3 years. Can our feelings be broken just like that?" I pointed at her fiercely. "Don't mention 3 years to me. You made me a fool for 3 years. You lied to me for more than 3 years, and you have the nerve to mention 3 years to me?" I looked at Haley in front of me. The hatred in my heart couldn't be suppressed, and I went forward and choked her. I really wanted to end her like this. What she did to me, I can't cancel it out even if I kill her, but I let go in her increasingly weak breathing. I can't risk the rest of my life for someone like that. I'm going to make it worse for her. Haley coughed and coughed. She always thought I was a man without a temper. Lynn, father Haley's mom, was frightened by me, but I couldn't care less about them. Striding out of the hospital, "Haley, Tony, you brought this on yourselves." Haley went to find Tony. Tony has now taken care of himself. He was blocked by the loan sharks, cut off a finger. It was me who told those people Tony's hiding place. Haley seems to have figured it all out. She came to me and said she would break it off with Tony and have a good life with me, wanting to break it off with me. I laughed at her reality and how naive I had been, almost losing my life for such a woman. I wasn't going to let them off the hook. I was going to put them on the internet and accept the scorn of the netizens. But I didn't do that after all, because that innocent child, woe betide his family, that was my last mercy. I went on to charge Haley and Tony with intentional homicide, which was recorded on the garage's surveillance cameras. They went to work on the surveillance after my accident, fearing I'd get suspicious, but not as quickly as I did, and then they didn't bother with the surveillance after a month when they thought it automatically updated after a month. There was also the recording of Haley that I kept. The two had already torn their faces off, and with a little deception, they gave a clean account of their crimes. In the end, Haley and Tony were sentenced to 2 and 3 years for attempted intentional homicide. They would waste away in prison. I went to see Tony first, a man I didn't know what kind of mood to face him with. He only froze for a moment before he clasped his arms around me and said contemptuously, "This time, it's as you wanted it." I pretended not to hear the malice in his words and just looked at him seriously. "Tony, did you recognize me?" Tony scoffed. "I'd recognize you even if you were turned into ashes. Do you know how Dad got into the accident? He was trying to rush to your graduation. My mom stopped him, but he wouldn't listen. I'm his son too, but he took you for a baby." Tony was getting more and more agitated. "It's because of you that my family is broken, that I'm a child with no one to care for me. Who am I to let you have a good life? I'm going to ruin your life. I let Haley get close to you. I'm trying to make you unhappy." I didn't realize that Tony's hatred for me was so deep. It turned out that I had been wrong about my dad, thinking that he didn't care about me after he remarried. But those faults, what right did Tony have to rest on my body? Those hate also can't cover up the evil deeds he did to me. I said coldly, "Tony, being cuckolded is not a good feeling, right?" Tony snickered. "And how much better are you, still being the receiver?" I lowered my voice. "Tony, it doesn't feel good to have a broken finger, does it?" Tony's expression changed. His anger was visible to me. He pointed at me and shouted, "So it's all you. You're the one who got me into trouble. I underestimated you." I returned the scorn. "It wasn't me that got you into trouble. It was your self-righteousness that got you into trouble." I ignored his hiss as he was taken away. I had my next meeting. I saw Haley one last time. She gritted her teeth at me. I smiled back and, "Haley, you're to blame for all of this. We were wrong from the start. The love I once had for you at first sight wasn't fake. It was you who were wrong. You shouldn't have thought that honest people were easy to bully." I saw a flash of hesitation on Haley's face. "Rocky, I thought about calling it quits once. That time I wanted a divorce. I didn't want to hear her talk anymore." The three of us had come to the end of our feud. Haley and Tony had paid for their mistakes, and I, too, had lost my home for my lack of knowledge. The sun was shining outside, and I took a firm step into it. Everyone will eventually pay for their own mistakes, and I, for one, have held myself accountable to the end. End of full article.